Well, now I want to turn to something that's a little different in, in a material that I've always had trouble with, and that's white metal. But Pat Rivard has been building a white metal crane model from Crow Industries, isn't it, Pat? Um, that he's just done a beautiful job with it, and supposedly he's going to finish that crane model tonight. So, Pat, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jim. This here, I think you can see it okay, working with cast metal parts in a kit. As you can see, we're building an O-scale fixed boom crane kit number 308 from Crow River Products. It's made of rosin and metal. I'd say about 80% of this kit is metal. Now, if we can move along, we'll go to where we left off last time. And let's see. Yeah, here we are. Yep. As I made a really big boo-boo here, I put this thing together and I realized that the pulley was on there for the cable and I didn't have the rope wrapped around it. So that's one of these things you kind of have to watch when you're doing a kit. It kind of makes it hard to put it on after it's assembled. And I learned this the hard way. The first time I did it right, the second time I did it wrong. So you can see what happens when you take it off here. You have to kind of scrape the crazy glue off. Otherwise, it isn't going to glue back on after you get your rope wrapped around this pulley. Anyway, moving along. There's another part that gave me a whole lot of trouble, and this part is made out of plastic, and this part is made out of metal. So in order to get this thing to hold into place, I have a whole bunch of these little clothespin type clamps, and that kind of helped me hold it in place while the crazy glue set. And you can also see the gear that fits on the bottom of this boom. The boom is made out of rosin, and this is made out of metal. It goes through the bottom plate, and it is put in place for the motor to turn this gear and turn the whole boom assembly. As you can see, this is how it works. This here is actually an electric motor. I had to drill a hole again. This is another thing you're going to find out. Every time you turn around, none of the holes are the right size, especially on this pulley on the boom. I found that this hole goes through this pulley wasn't right on this bearing here. So I had to drill out all the bearings so that this shaft would fit through it. So that's another thing you're going to run into a problem with a lot of these kits. And moving along, you can see the bearing down here, and here's them good old files that I use. This one happens to be the round file. And that helps to clean some of this off and hold pieces down as I glue them. Here you can see that gear that I put on that pulley. And this happens to be just before I ripped it back off again to put the rope back on it, or the cable back on. But you'll notice that it's a two-part casting, and this is why you have to file as best you can, because actually these two sections on that gear are offset. They're not perfectly aligned. And I think that's partly because it was come out of the casting that way, or out of the mold that way. Anyway, you'll see these are the two brass tubes that I put down through the top. That was another set of holes I had to re-drill in order to fit. And you got another set of holes here that go back this way that hold your boom, as you'll see when we move along. Now here's how the gears line up to the large electric motor that turns this unit. And there's that pulley and that gear on the other side. And that's that shaft and the holes that I had to pre-drill through these gears in order for them to fit on. You're going to find this a lot with kits like this. Is you have to check them before you start assembling them to make sure that the shafts fit. There's that small electric motor that actually turns this gear at the bottom. Then there is the pulley again without the cable on, which I forgot. This is after the fact. And there's the large electric motor sitting on a base that has the gears mounted to them so that they align together. You'll find you have to fit this in dry fit it to make sure it will fit this gear, because you're going to glue them in place. You can't make them turn that I know of. I tried that trick, but it won't work. But I had to re-drill the holes in these in order to fit and make sure they aligned up properly before you glued them. And here's another picture of that. You'll see here, I had to drill that hole to fit that shaft on that pulley. And the same thing here. They're basically about the same size. And I'll tell you, when you're drilling them, you got to be really careful. You don't drill through your hand. I use a Dremel. It's the only way you can do the job properly. Then I clean it up a little bit afterwards. Now here you'll see the gear on the other side of the pulley. It fits this small gear right here. Some more holes to clean up and fit. And then there's the base on which it mounts. And this part here is actually glued down to this base. This base is made out of cast plastic. It's a rosin plastic, big solid piece. There's a rear view of it. And you can see the bearings mounted on the boom itself. Another thing you're going to have to watch out for in working with metal parts, a lot of these metal parts here have a tendency to bend very easily. And you have to be very careful when you're assembling them that you don't bend them out of shape or get them in the, if you bend them too much, they will break off very easily. Then right here where it fits into the base, I found I had to clean this up a little bit for it to fit right in very snugly or very evenly. There's those two brass rods that go to your boom assembly. These support your boom assembly permanently. It does not move up or down. That's why I call it a fixed boom crane. And this here is supposed to be the nut that holds this shaft. And then there's another nut on the other side, besides the guy putting it together, that you have to put on that one. So everything has to fit together properly. Here's the overall picture of this with the cross members put on. Those are plastic. I put nut and bolt castings on every one of them, on all this part, and to make sure this pulley fit in there. That's another one I had to drill a hole through and put the nut on to make sure it fit properly. A lot of drilling, grinding, sanding, filing. After a while, you start to get a little disappointed, but it comes together. There's the gears and the pulley. Now, as you'll see, I spray painted this with a primer, the whole kit, after it was assembled. And that gave me the bite that I needed for the paint work to stick to it. And the paint that I used was not paint so much as it was powders. I used the Bragdon powders, and I also used the Dr. Benz powders. And I use it with a brush and alcohol. And I make the mixture kind of thick to go on so it colors properly. And I like the base color, it leaves a very flat color. Here's the assembly of the cab. That's all made of rosin. And every one of these pieces are put together. This is one back and front, are both the same. There's your base, and there's your side with the door, and the other side has a window also. So there's actually a window all the way around so you can see what you're doing. I added lights to this. I like adding lights to everything I build. And it was fun doing that, I'll tell you. Now you can see where I painted the cab. And it wasn't paint again. I used the powders. You can see the powder mix here. And it used with a stiff brush. I like to use a stiff brush because it gives a better finish on it. After that, I used different colors, as you see here, to give it a tone down from the yellow that I had. And you'll see that I mounted the toolbox on the side of the cab that comes with the kit. There's an overall view of the cab mounted to the crane. There was two pieces that stuck out from the side of the crane, which just mounted on. So you're mounted to one side of the crane. Inside, I put a figure he's waving at somebody. I found that quite interesting. After you get done, you light it up and you see his figure with his hand up in the air waving at you. Here's it is mounted, installed on my building. This is my planing mill that I assembled. This gives you an overall view of what it looks like sitting on this platform. There's another view. And you can see how I had the rope put down through and over the top and down and through a big hook. There's another view. This thing spins on that, so it turns. I have it turning. And you can see where I routed the cables through the floor. Leaving yourself a lot of slack in that, because you're going to turn this thing. You're going to have it going in and out on you. It's too hard to mount it along the side of this, because if you turn it, it'll break it right off. These wires are very thin. And you also see on the side, I put the brass handrails for grabbing when you mount on it. And there's a little ladder on the side here you put in. There's another view, top view. And there's the cable I mounted on there. As you can see, it's very difficult to wind this thing around and make it look right without putting it on before you assemble it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, you'll have a heck of a time. I tried it once before and it won't work, so I made sure I put it on and put it back on in the right position. This gives you a better picture of it. It's very hard to wind up a whole lot of cable on there without having a lot of trouble. Here you can see the gear didn't turn out too bad with the extra filing I did. That was the first one I built. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it when you get done. There's another view of the other one that I built. I have 3 of these to build. So it's going to become quite a challenge to do the third one. I might try some different tricks again. But as you go, you learn, and you don't get anywhere unless you try it. There's a view of the other model.
That's some nice models, they really are.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun, and it's quite rewarding when you get done with a metal kit.
Yeah.
Any questions, don't be afraid to ask, because I'm not the complete professional at building one of these things. And that's it.
Pat, are you using powders for your rusting also?
Yes. I know it. It's, I don't know. You'll find that it's quite tricky sometimes.
Are they artist pigments or?
That is a good question. I don't know what Dr. Ben's.
Oh, okay. Powder. Yeah, most of his are.
Yeah.
I've got one of his rust powders, and it's the same as a lot of the artist pigments that I order from art supply houses.
It works well with alcohol.
Well, they sure do, yeah.
I was very amazed at how it does the job. It's just like painting. The more alcohol you use, the more wash you have. So that's the whole trick of it. Like the roof itself, I found that it was, I did it with the black, and it was very flat looking, and it looked like it was tar when it was done.
Well, they're impressive looking models. They really are.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks a lot. It was fun doing.
Well,
I have one that's even more complicated coming. It's a thrashing machine. I got a thrashing machine to put together, and it's all metal. So I don't know about that one.
Well, show it to us when you get it done.
Yeah, I'll show it to you, but I'm not going through all this. Thanks.
Well,
thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.